The lights in the big space station flickered as Ambassador Zethkar rushed into the meeting room. His 6 arms shook as he turned on the communication device. All around the galaxy, alien leaders were waiting to hear his words. They all knew. Something terrible was happening. None of them knew how bad it really was. Zethkar's voice cracked as he began to speak. My friends across the stars, I bring you the worst news our people have ever heard. The machines we call the Harvesters have broken through our last line of defense. They are not just attacking us anymore. They are eating our worlds. On the screen behind him, images showed what used to be beautiful planets full of life. Now, they looked like giant metal graveyards. Where millions of people once lived, worked, and played, there were only twisted pieces of dark metal reaching up toward space like the fingers of dead giants. 3 of our biggest worlds are gone, Zethkar continued, his voice getting quieter. Viridian Prime, with its floating cities and crystal forests, is now nothing but scrap metal. New Haven, where we built our greatest schools, has been turned into a machine factory. And Paradise Station, where children from 100 different worlds came to learn and play together, is just empty space now. The other alien leaders watching the broadcast felt their hearts sink. The Viridian people were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and teachers. If the Harvesters could destroy them so easily, what hope did anyone else have? Our military tried everything, Zethkar went on. We sent our biggest warships. We used our smartest battle plans. We even asked the warrior clans of Rigel for help. Nothing worked. These machines just keep coming. They turn our own people into more machines to fight us. They learn from every battle and get stronger. Far away from this meeting, in a small corner of the galaxy that most aliens had never heard of, Captain Jake Morrison was sitting in his chair on the bridge of a human spaceship called the EU's Valiant. Jake was a big man with short gray hair and scars on his hands from years of fighting. He had been a soldier on Earth before he became a spaceship captain, and he still moved like a man ready for trouble. Captain, we're getting something strange on the long-range communications, said Lieutenant Amy Carter. She was young and smart, with quick fingers that danced over her control panel. It's coming from way out in deep space. Sounds like some kind of emergency call. Jake leaned forward in his chair. Put it on the main speaker, Amy. Let's hear what's got everyone so upset. The bridge filled with Zethkar's voice, speaking in the common galactic language that humans had learned when they first met aliens 20 years ago. Jake listened carefully as the alien ambassador described the destruction of entire worlds and the desperate need for help. Sir, said Sergeant Pete Davis from the weapons station, this sounds really bad. These harvester things, they sound like they could be a threat to Earth too, if they keep spreading. Jake nodded slowly. He had fought in 3 wars before joining the space fleet, and he knew the sound of real fear when he heard it. This alien wasn't making up stories or asking for help with some small problem. This was life and death for billions of people across the galaxy. Amy, get me a direct line to Earth Command right now, Jake ordered. And Pete, start running checks on all our weapon systems. Something tells me we're going to need them soon. On Earth, in a big underground room filled with computers and communication equipment, Admiral Kate Brooks was already busy. She was a tall woman with short black hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. She had been watching the alien broadcasts along with military leaders from all over Earth. How many ships can we get ready for deep space combat? She asked Colonel Ryan Mitchell, who was standing next to a big map showing all of Earth's military forces. We've got 42 ships in the main fleet, Ryan replied. Another 68 in the Planetary Defense Force, but those aren't built for long trips. If we push hard, we could have a battle group of 50 ships ready to leave in 3 days. Admiral. Brooks thought about this for a moment. 50 ships didn't sound like much compared to the huge fleets that some alien civilizations could put together, but human ships were different. They were built tough and designed to fight in conditions that would destroy most alien vessels. Make it happen, she said. Can get Dr. Ben Carter on the line. If we're going up against these harvester machines, we're going to need every advantage we can get. Dr. Ben Carter was working late in his laboratory when the call came through. He was a thin man with messy brown hair who spent most of his time thinking about new ways to build weapons and defensive systems. When he heard about the harvesters, his first thought wasn't fear, it was curiosity. Machines that can convert organic matter into more machines, he said to himself as he read the reports. Interesting. Very interesting. I wonder what kind of power source they use. And more importantly, I wonder what their weak spots are. Ben had grown up on Earth where humans had learned to fight everything from giant sharks to deadly diseases to weather that could freeze or burn a person in minutes. The idea of fighting machines didn't scare him, it just meant he needed to figure out how machines could be broken. Meanwhile, in space stations and military bases all across human territory, similar conversations were happening. Captain Helen Cruz was getting her ship ready for the longest fight of her life. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Harrison was checking her ground combat gear and thinking about what it would be like to fight robots on an alien world. Thousands of men and women who had signed up to protect Earth were now preparing to protect people they had never met, on worlds they had never seen. The thing that none of the aliens knew, as they sent out their desperate calls for help, was what kind of species they were asking for aid. Humans had evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them. Earth had ice ages that lasted for thousands of years, volcanoes that could destroy entire continents, storms that could level cities, and animals with teeth and claws designed for tearing apart anything that moved. Most alien species came from gentler worlds. Their planets were stable and safe, with mild weather and few dangerous animals. When they faced a threat like the Harvesters, their first instinct was to run and hide, to find a safe place and wait for the danger to pass. Humans were different. When they faced danger, they got angry. When someone threatened their friends, they fought back. When the odds looked impossible, they just fought harder. As reports of the human response spread through the galaxy, many aliens wondered if these strange creatures from the small blue planet really understood what they were getting into. The Harvesters had destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity. They had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop the strongest alien attacks. But Ambassador Zethkar, listening to the reports of human ships gathering for battle, felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt hope. There was something in the way these humans talked about the coming fight that reminded him of old stories about legendary warriors who never backed down from any challenge. Soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone threatened a species that had been forged in the fires of a world that never stopped testing them. The Harvesters were about to meet their first real challenge, and they had no idea what was coming their way. The human fleet came out of hyperspace like angry hornets leaving their nest. 50 warships dropped into normal space at the edge of what used to be the Viridian home system. What they saw there made even the toughest soldiers go quiet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and stared at the main screen, where the report said there should be a beautiful blue and green planet with 6 million people living on it. There was now something that looked like a nightmare. The planet was still there, but it was wrong, completely wrong. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. "What did they do to it?" The planet that had once been covered with cities and forests and oceans was now a ball of black metal. Huge spikes stuck out from its surface, reaching up into space like the legs of a dead spider. The oceans were gone. The forests were gone. Even the clouds were gone. Everything that had once been alive was now part of a giant machine. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planet's surface," reported Sergeant Pete Davis. "Whatever. They built down there. It's still working, and it's big." Commander Lisa Park, captain of the UES Thunder, came on the communication channel. Her voice was tight with anger. "Jake, are you seeing this? They didn't just kill everyone. They turned the whole planet into some kind of factory." Admiral Brooks' voice cut through the chatter from her flagship, the UES Liberty. "All ships, maintain formation and stay alert. Long-range sensors are picking up movement near the planet. We've got company coming," cipher words had summoned. Them, 3 enormous shapes began moving away from the metal planet. The Harvester dreadnoughts were bigger than anything in the human fleet.
Oh, yes.
Each one was the size of a city, covered in weapons and armor that gleamed with a cold, deadly light. "Those are the biggest warships I've ever seen," said Captain Helen Cruz from the UES Ranger. "Each one of those things could take on our entire fleet." "Maybe," said Admiral Brooks. But they've never fought humans before. All ships, battle stations. Let's show these machines what happens when they mess with organic life. The harvester ships moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single giant machine. They formed a line between the human fleet and their metal planet and began charging their weapons. Energy readings spiked across every human sensor array. Ambassador Zethkar watched the battle from his refugee ship, hidden behind a moon in the outer system. He'd seen the harvesters destroy 3 different alien fleets in the past month. Each time the organic ships had tried to stay at long range and fight a careful defensive battle. Each time, the harvesters had simply overwhelmed them with superior firepower and perfect tactics. "The humans are moving forward," observed his aide, a young Viridian named Coulter. "They're not trying to keep their distance. Are they planning to ram the enemy ships?" Zethkar didn't answer. He was too busy watching something he had never seen before. The human ships weren't retreating. They weren't trying to fight a safe, careful battle. They were charging straight at the enemy like wild animals protecting their young. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Admiral Brooks ordered. "Hit them hard and hit them fast. If we're going to die today, let's make sure we take some of these metal bastards with us." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a new sun. The harvester weapons were incredibly powerful, designed to crack planetary shields and vaporize entire city blocks. They fired beams of pure energy that could cut through the strongest alien armor like it was paper. But the human ships were different. They had been built by people who knew that space was trying to kill them every second of every day. Human engineers didn't just make their ships strong, they made them tough. They made them able to keep fighting even when they were badly damaged. U.S. Thunder took a direct hit from a harvester energy beam. The blast tore through her port side and knocked out half her weapon systems. On any alien ship, that would have been the end of the fight. Commander Lisa Park just gritted her teeth and kept moving forward. "Damage report," she shouted over the alarms. "Port weapons are down. Life support is failing on decks 3 through 7. And we've lost the main shield generator," her second officer reported. "What about the engines and the starboard weapons?" "Still working, ma'am?" Lisa smiled grimly. "Then we're still in this fight. All power to starboard weapons. Let's see how these machines like a taste of human fury." The Thunder's remaining weapons opened fire on the nearest harvester ship. Human weapons were different from what the machines had faced before. Other alien races tried to build elegant, efficient weapons that used energy in precise, controlled bursts. Humans built weapons that were designed to cause as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. The harvester ship's shields flared and sparked under the assault. For the first time since the war began, a harvester vessel actually staggered under incoming fire. Captain Jake Morrison saw the enemy ship falter and immediately ordered his ship forward. "Amy, get me everything we have left in the missile tubes. Pete, I want all forward weapons ready to fire on my command." "Sir, if we get that close, they'll tear us apart," Amy warned. "Maybe," Jake replied, "but we'll hurt them first." "That's more than anyone else has managed to do." The Valiant screamed forward at full speed, diving directly at the damaged harvester ship. Jake had learned his tactics fighting pirates in the asteroid belt, where there was no room for careful long-range battles. You got in close, you hit as hard as you could, and you didn't stop hitting until your enemies stopped moving. Firing. Pete shouted, and the Valiant's weapons lit up the darkness. The harvester ship tried to turn its main guns on the small human vessel, but Jake was flying like a man possessed. He threw his ship around like a fighter pilot, using every trick he had learned in 20 years of combat. The big alien weapons couldn't track him, but the smaller defensive weapons could. Energy beams lashed out from the harvester ship, tearing into the Valiant's hull. Explosions rocked the bridge. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. The lights went out and came back on red. "Hull breach on deck 4, Amy reported. "We're losing atmosphere fast. Seal it off," Jake ordered. "Date. Are our weapons?" "Missiles are gone, but we still have the main gun," Pete replied. Jake looked at the harvester ship on his screen. They were so close now that he could see the details of its armor plating. He could see the weapon ports and the sensor arrays. He could see where their attacks had damaged the enemy's hull. repeat, put everything we have left into one shot. Aim for that weak spot near their main reactor. Sir, if we overload the gun like that, it'll probably blow out our entire power grid. Jake grinned. Then we better make sure we don't miss. The Valiant's main gun fired once, pouring all of its remaining power into a single, devastating blast. The energy beam punched through the Harvester ship's damaged armor and struck something vital deep inside. The enemy ship exploded. The blast waved through the Valiant backward like a toy. But Jake didn't care. He was laughing as his ship tumbled through space, its systems failing one by one. "Did you see that?" shouted over the communication channel. "We killed one of them. These things can die." All across the battlefield, human ships pressed their attack with renewed fury. They had seen one of the mighty Harvester vessels destroyed, and now they knew it was possible. The machines weren't invincible. They could be hurt. They could be killed. And humans were very, very good at killing things that threatened their pack. News of the human victory spread through alien space faster than any ship could travel. On refugee stations and hidden colonies throughout the galaxy, alien survivors watched the battle reports with growing amazement. The humans had not just fought the Harvesters. They had actually won. Ambassador Zethkar sat in his small quarters on the refugee ship, reading the messages that poured in from across Viridian space. Every report said the same thing. The terrible machines that had seemed unstoppable were retreating. For the first time in months, Harvester ships were actually running away from a fight. "Sir," said his aide Coulter, rushing into the room with a datapad in his hands. "We just received a transmission from the human fleet. They want to meet with you to discuss strategy." Zethkar felt his hearts beating faster. In all his years as a diplomat, he had never heard of humans before the emergency broadcast. Now these mysterious creatures from the edge of the galaxy were asking to coordinate with his people. He wondered what kind of beings could fight so fiercely for strangers they had never met. On the human flagship U.S. Liberty, Admiral Brooks was studying tactical displays with her senior officers. The first battle had taught them important lessons. About their enemy, the Harvesters were powerful and well-armed, but they fought like machines. They used predictable patterns and logical tactics. They're strong, but they're not creative. She explained to Captain Steve Hayes, who had just arrived from the UES Ranger. They expect their enemies to fight the same way every time. When we did something unexpected, like Jake's suicide run, they didn't know how to respond. Dr. Ben Carter looked up from the pile of Harvester wreckage he had been studying. "I've been analyzing the debris from the ship we destroyed. These machines are incredibly advanced, but they have a weakness. They're networked together. Ship shares information with all the others instantly." "That sounds like an advantage for them," said Colonel Ryan Mitchell. "It is, until you turn it against them," Ben replied with a smile. "If we can figure out how to disrupt their network, we might be able to confuse their entire fleet at once." Meanwhile, reports were coming in from across the sector. Harvester forces that had been systematically destroying alien worlds were suddenly changing their behavior. Instead of pressing their attacks, they were pulling back and forming defensive positions. It was as if the destruction of a single ship had made the entire collective more cautious. On the surface of Kepler Station, mining world that had been under siege for weeks, Colonel Amy Harrison led her Marines in the first ground assault against Harvester forces. The aliens who had been hiding in underground shelters watched in amazement as human soldiers advanced through territory that no organic troops had been able to hold. "Stay low and keep moving," Amy ordered her troops as they moved through the twisted metal structures the Harvesters had built. "These machines are tough, but they're not used to fighting infantry that refuses to stay put." The Harvester ground units were designed to hunt down fleeing civilians and convert them into more machines. They moved in straight lines and used overwhelming firepower to crush resistance. They had never faced soldiers who used cover and movement. Like weapons themselves, Sergeant Tony Blake ducked behind a fallen metal beam as energy blasts sizzled over his head. "Colonel, these things are shooting where we were, not where we are. It's like they can't adapt to us changing position." "It's because they're used to fighting people who panic," Amy replied. "Keep them guessing. Use every trick we learned." In urban combat training, The Marines moved through the station like ghosts, appearing from unexpected directions and disappearing before the machines could respond. They used explosives to collapse passages, set traps in narrow corridors, and turned the Harvester's own size against them in tight spaces. Back in space, more human ships were arriving every day. The fleet that had started with 50 vessels was growing into a proper invasion force. Admiral Brooks found herself commanding over 200 ships, with more on the way from Earth. But the most important arrivals weren't warships, they were the support vessels carrying scientists, engineers, and specialists. Dr. Ben Carter had requested every expert on robotics and computer systems that Earth could spare. If they were going to win this war, they needed to understand their enemy better than anyone had before. The key is their communication system, Ben explained to a meeting of human and alien scientists. Every Harvester unit is connected to every other unit through some kind of quantum network. They share information instantly across vast distances. A Viridian scientist named Vilanith raised one of his forearms. Our people tried to jam their communications before. Didn't work. Their signals seemed to pass through normal space without any interference. That's because they're not using normal space, Ben replied. They're using quantum entanglement. Each machine is linked to the others at a subatomic level. Distance doesn't matter. Dr. Susan Blake, a quantum physicist who had arrived on the latest transport, leaned forward with interest. If they're using entanglement, then they're vulnerable to quantum interference. We might be able to introduce chaos into their network. Chaos? Svel. Susan smiled. Random information. It's contradictory orders. False data. Imagine if every machine in their network suddenly started receiving different instructions at the same time. While the scientists worked on their theories, the war continued. Human ships struck at Harvester positions throughout the sector, using tactics that no alien military had ever attempted. They didn't try to hold territory or protect their supply lines. They just kept attacking, over and over, until the enemy started making mistakes. Captain Helen Cruz had taken command of a small squadron of fast attack ships. Her job was to hit Harvester outposts and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. It was dangerous work, but it was exactly the kind of fighting that humans had perfected during centuries of warfare on Earth. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight, she told her pilots before each mission. We're trying to make them afraid to leave their bases. Every time they send out a patrol, we make sure some of them don't come back. The psychological effect on the Harvesters was unexpected. Machines weren't supposed to feel fear, but their behavior was definitely changing. They were becoming more defensive, more cautious. They were acting like prey instead of predators. Ambassador Zethkar finally met with Admiral Brooks on the Liberties bridge. The alien diplomat was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. He moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent his life avoiding conflict. Admiral Brooks, he said, through the translation device, I must ask you a question that has been troubling my people. Why are you helping us? You barely knew we existed before our emergency broadcast. Why risk your lives for strangers? Kate Brooks looked out at the stars through the bridge's main window. Ambassador, on our world we have a saying. You don't get to choose your family, but you get to choose your pack. The moment your people asked for help, you became part of our pack, and humans protect their pack. Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. Your species is very different from ours. We Viridians are peaceful by nature. We avoid conflict whenever possible. But you seem to seek it out. We don't seek out conflict, Kate replied. But we don't run from it either. Our world taught us that sometimes you have to fight for what's right. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they're bigger than you are. And if you lose? Kate smiled grimly. Then we take as many of them with us as we can. But we don't plan on losing, Ambassador. These machines made a big mistake when they decided to threaten organic life. They're about to learn what happens when you mess with a species that evolved on a world that spent millions of years trying to kill them. As if to prove her point, reports began coming in from across the sector. Human forces were winning battles that should have been impossible. They were taking territory that the Harvesters had held for months. Most importantly, they were giving hope to billions of aliens who had thought their cause was lost. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best way to fight monsters was to call in an even more dangerous monster. And humanity was very, very dangerous when someone threatened their pack. The war had been going on for 3 months when human intelligence discovered the location of the Harvester homeworld. Deep in a system that had been stripped of all life, a massive mechanical planet served as the central command for the entire Harvester network. Dr. Ben Carter stood before a holographic display showing the target, his face grim with determination. "This is it," he announced to the assembled fleet commanders. "The main hub of their network. If we can take out this facility, we can cripple their entire operation across the galaxy." Admiral Brooks studied the tactical display carefully. The Harvester homeworld was protected by hundreds of automated defense platforms and patrolled by the largest concentration of enemy ships anyone had ever seen. It should have been impossible to attack. "How many ships are we looking at?" asked Captain Steve Hayes. "Our best estimate is over 300 Harvester vessels of various sizes," replied Colonel Ryan Mitchell, "plus orbital weapons that could destroy anything that gets close to the planet." Dr. Susan Blake stepped forward, with a data pad in her hands. "But we have something they don't expect. The quantum virus is ready for deployment. If we can get close enough to inject it into their network, it will spread to every connected system within hours." The quantum virus was humanity's secret weapon. For weeks, the best human and alien scientists had worked together to create a piece of code that could turn the Harvester's greatest strength against them. Instead of sharing useful information, their network would start spreading chaos and confusion. "The problem is delivery," Ben explained. "We need to get right into the heart of their system to upload the virus. That means someone has to land on the planet's surface and reach their central computer core." "A suicide mission," said Captain Helen Cruz quietly. "Not necessarily," Admiral Brooks replied. "We've learned a lot about how these machines think. They're logical and predictable. If we can make them react the way we want them to, we might be able to create the opening we need." The plan that Admiral Brooks outlined was the most dangerous thing the human fleet had ever attempted. While the main force attacked the orbital defenses and drew the enemy fleet into a massive space battle, a small team would use captured Harvester technology to sneak past the planet's sensors. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Harrison would lead the ground assault with her best Marines. Dr. Susan Blake would go with them to deploy the virus. And Captain Jake Morrison, whose ship had been repaired after the first battle, would command the stealth insertion team. "This is going to be the hardest fight any of us have ever been in," Admiral Brooks told her officers. "The enemy is going to throw everything they have at us. But remember what we're fighting for. Every organic species in the galaxy is counting on us." 2 days later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Harvester system. What they saw there made even the most experienced veterans take a deep breath. The mechanical planet was huge, twice the size of Earth, covered with massive factory complexes and weapons installations. Around it swarmed the largest enemy fleet anyone had ever seen. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks," came the voice over the communication channels. "Today we finish what the Harvesters started when they decided to destroy innocent worlds. Today, we show them what happens when you threaten the pack." The battle began with the largest exchange of fire in galactic history. Hundreds of ships on both sides opened up with every weapon they had. Space lit up with energy beams, missile trails, and explosions that could be seen from light years away. The human ships fought like wild animals. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. When the UES Thunder lost her main engines, Commander Lisa Park used her ship's momentum to crash into a Harvester cruiser, taking both vessels out of the fight. "This is insane," transmitted Captain Danny Lopez from the EU's Eagle as he watched human ships throw themselves at the enemy with complete disregard for their own safety. "We're supposed to be the ones with the death wish, not them." But the crazy tactics were working. Harvesters had never faced an enemy that seemed to get more dangerous as the battle went on. Every time they destroyed a human ship, the remaining vessels fought even harder. It was like fighting a pack of wolves that got hungrier with every bite. while the space battle raged. Jake Morrison piloted his modified ship through the chaos toward the planet's surface. His vessel looked like a harvester transport from the outside, but inside it carried Amy Harrison's Marines and the most important computer virus in galactic history. "Stealth systems are holding," reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from the navigation station. "The enemy sensors are reading us as one of their own supply ships." Jake nodded grimly. The disguise would only work as long as they didn't do anything suspicious. One wrong move, and every defense system on the planet would target them. They landed in a massive factory complex on the planet's night side. The facility stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, filled with machines that were converting raw materials into new harvester units. In the center of the complex was their target, a huge tower that housed the central processing unit for the entire network. Amy Harrison led her Marines out of the ship and into the mechanical landscape. The air was thick with toxic fumes and the constant noise of automated production. In the distance, they could see harvester units moving in perfect formation, completely unaware that enemies had landed on their home world. "Stay quiet and stick to the shadows," Amy whispered into her communicator. "We've got about 2 miles to reach the central tower. Dr. Blake, how long do you need once we get there?" "Give me 10 minutes with their main computer, and I can upload the virus," Susan replied. "But I'll need to access their primary data core directly. No remote connections." Marines moved through the factory complex like ghosts. They had trained for urban warfare in Earth's most dangerous cities, and this mechanical landscape was just another battlefield to them. They used the constant noise of the factories to mask their movement and the shadows between buildings to stay hidden. But they weren't completely unnoticed. As they got closer to the central tower, harvester security patrols became more frequent. The machines hadn't detected the intruders yet, but they knew something was wrong. "Movement ahead," whispered Sergeant Tony Blake from his position at point. 3 harvester units coming our way. They're scanning everything." Amy made a quick decision. "Take them out quietly. We can't let them report our position." The Marines struck like lightning. In seconds, 3 harvester units were reduced to scrap metal without ever knowing what hit them. But their destruction sent an automatic alert through the network. "Alarms are going off all over the complex," reported Dr. Blake, monitoring her scanner. "They know we're here now." "Then we move fast," Amy replied. "All units double time to the target. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this whole place is crawling with enemies." The final assault on the central tower was everything Amy had expected and worse. Harvester units poured out of every building, moving with mechanical precision to surround the human infiltrators. But the Marines had been trained for exactly this kind of situation. They fought their way up the tower level by level, using explosives and heavy weapons to clear their path. Every floor was a battle. Every corridor was a potential death trap, but they kept moving forward because they knew that billions of lives depended on them. Finally, they reached the central computer core. Dr. Susan Blake connected her equipment to the massive quantum processor that controlled the entire harvester network. Her fingers flew over her controls as she began uploading the virus that would end the war. "Almost there," she said as enemy forces pounded on the reinforced doors. Just 30 more seconds. The doors exploded inward, and harvester units began pouring into the chamber. Amy Harrison and her Marines formed a defensive line, pouring fire into the mechanical attackers. "Upload complete," Susan shouted over the noise of battle across the galaxy. Every harvester unit suddenly received the same signal at the same moment. But instead of coordination orders, they got chaos. The virus spread through their quantum network like wildfire, turning their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The war was over. Humanity had won. 6 months after the last harvester ship went silent, Ambassador Zethkar stood in the rebuilt council chambers of Kepler Station. The meeting hall that had once echoed with desperate cries for help now buzzed with respectful conversation. Representatives from hundreds of alien species had gathered to witness something that had never happened before in galactic history. "Today marks a new beginning for all organic life in the galaxy," Zethkar announced to the assembled delegates. "We are here to formally welcome humanity into the Galactic Council and to thank them for saving us all from extinction. In the front row of the assembly, Admiral Kate Brooks sat with her senior officers. She wore her dress uniform, which still bore the scars and patches from the recent war. Next to her, Dr. Ben Carter fidgeted with a datapad containing technical reports about the harvester technology they had captured. Captain Steve Hayes looked around the room with amazement, still not quite believing that the small fleet from Earth had become the most respected military force in the galaxy. The debt we owe to humanity cannot be measured in credits or territory, Zethkar continued. They came to our aid when we had nothing to offer in return. They fought our war as if it were their own. And they asked for nothing except the chance to protect innocent life. The alien delegates nodded in agreement. Word of human bravery had spread to every corner of civilized space. Stories were already being told of the suicide runs, the impossible battles, and the small group of Marines who had walked into the heart of the enemy's strongest fortress and emerged victorious. Admiral Brooks stood to address the assembly. Her voice was calm and steady, but everyone in the room could hear the strength behind her words. "We didn't fight your war," she said simply. "We fought our war. The moment those machines threatened organic life, they became our enemy.
Yes.
What humans do, we protect our pack. And 6 months ago, you all became part of our pack." A murmur went through the alien delegates. The concept of pack loyalty was familiar to some species, but few understood it the way humans did. For most aliens, loyalty was based on trade agreements, mutual defense treaties, or shared genetic heritage. For humans, it was simpler and stronger. If you were in trouble and asked for help, you became family. Dr. Susan Blake, who had survived the mission to the Harvester home world, was working with alien scientists to make sure nothing like the mechanical plague could ever threaten the galaxy again. She had been studying Harvester technology for months, learning how their network functioned and how to defend against similar threats. The interesting thing about the Harvesters, she explained to a group of Viridian researchers, is that they were too perfect. Their network had no room for chaos or unpredictability. When we introduced random elements into their system, they couldn't adapt. A young Viridian scientist named Talvin raised his hand. "But Dr. Blake, how did your people know to use chaos as a weapon?" "Most species try to create order and predictability in their military systems." Susan smiled. "Because we come from a world that's naturally chaotic. Earth never lets us get comfortable. We're always dealing with storms, earthquakes, diseases, and predators that force us to adapt quickly. We learn that sometimes the best way to win is to make things more unpredictable, not less." Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was working with alien fleet commanders to establish new patrol routes throughout the galaxy. His job was to make sure that the shipping lanes stayed safe and that no new threats could grow unchecked in the dark spaces between stars. "The key is to stay mobile," he explained to a mixed group of human and alien officers. "Don't wait for trouble to come to you. Go out and find it before it becomes a big problem." Commander Velenoth of the Viridian Defense Force was still amazed by human military thinking. "Captain Morrison, your people seem to enjoy looking for danger. Most civilized species try to avoid conflict whenever possible." Jake laughed. "We don't enjoy danger, Commander. But we've learned that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. If there's something out there that might threaten innocent people, we'd rather deal with it now than wait for it to become unstoppable." The effects of human involvement in galactic affairs went far beyond military matters. Human traders were establishing new commercial routes. Human doctors were sharing medical knowledge with alien physicians, and human engineers were helping to rebuild worlds that had been damaged by the Harvester attacks. On New Viridian, the first colony world established to replace the destroyed Viridian home planet, human construction teams worked alongside alien engineers to build cities that could withstand almost any disaster. The humans insisted on building everything to Earth standards, which meant the structures could survive earthquakes, hurricanes, and even small meteor impacts. "Why do you build everything so strong?" asked Chief Engineer Morden, watching Human. "Workers install support beams that seemed far too heavy for the building they were constructing. Because you never know what's going to try to knock it down," replied construction foreman Bill Chen. "On Earth, we learned that if you don't build it tough enough the first time, you'll just have to build it again later, usually when you can't. Afford to, the cultural exchange worked both ways. Humans were learning about alien art, music, and philosophy. Many human children were now learning alien languages in school. Human universities were establishing exchange programs with educational institutions across the galaxy. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed
conflict
and defense. Before the Harvester War, most species believed in careful, defensive strategies. They built strong shields, established safe territories, and tried to avoid fights whenever possible. Humanity had shown them a different way. Sometimes the best way to protect your home was to take the fight to your enemy's home. Sometimes you had to be willing to risk everything to save what mattered most. Admiral Brooks found herself in charge of the new Galactic Defense Initiative, a combined fleet made up of ships and crews from dozens of different species. But everyone understood that the humans would be the ones leading the charge if another threat emerged from the darkness between stars. Wait, do you think we'll face something like the Harvesters again? Asked Captain Helen Cruz during a staff meeting. Aboard the new flagship, the GDS Unity, probably, Kate replied. The galaxy is a big place, and we've only explored a small part of it. There are probably things out there that make the Harvesters look friendly, and when we find them, Kate smiled grimly, then we'll do what humans always do. We'll adapt, we'll fight, and we'll protect our pack. It's worked so far. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Harrison, now promoted to full colonel, was establishing training facilities on multiple worlds. Her job was to teach alien military forces how to fight like humans when the situation called for it. The most important lesson, she told a class of alien officers, is that you never give up. No matter how bad things look, no matter how outgunned, you keep fighting until you win or until you can't fight anymore. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. As the years passed, humanity's reputation continued to grow. They became known as the species you called when something impossible needed to be done. When pirates threatened trade routes, human patrol ships would hunt them down. When natural disasters struck alien worlds, human rescue teams would arrive. With equipment that could work in any environment, but more than their military prowess or their technical skills, humans became known for something else. They became known as the species that would risk everything for strangers. They were the ones who would cross the galaxy to help people they had never met. Simply because those people had asked for help, the galaxy had learned an important lesson. From the Harvester War, sometimes the most, dangerous predators weren't the ones with the biggest teeth or the strongest weapons. Sometimes they were the ones who had learned to survive on a world that never stopped trying to kill them. And when those predators decided that you were part of their pack, nothing in the universe would be allowed to hurt you. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy was a safer place because of it.